Philadelphia Eagles training camp is officially underway, and we've got takeaways for you coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome in, Eagles fans, to a Wednesday edition of the show. Happy opening day for Philadelphia Eagles training camp. The Birds were on the practice field today. We got a lot of takeaways from that practice on today's show, and we're brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use our code in all capital letters, Locked On NFL. You're going to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms, of course, do apply. I'm Louis DiBiase, joined as always by my co-host Gino Camilleri. Gino, we are officially through the dead zone. It is football time. We're back, and we've got a lot of takeaways today from the first day of practice. I think the main one, honestly, and there's so much to get into, from the secondary, who is initially up as starters on the first team, some injury news as well. But I think the biggest takeaway from today's practice was that Jalen Hurts looked sharp both on and off the field, and that really set the tone for me. Like, the energy is high, and I think it's because that's what your quarterback brought into today. And that's so important because, honestly, I wasn't really feeling that energy from him through OTAs.
That's the one thing about Jalen, is he's never going to let it be known truly what's going on. And I think he made a really good tongue-in-cheek comment about, I'm only going to show you what I want to show you. But I think Jalen Hurts put on an absolute clinic today in how you respond to a question from a reporter who happened to be the first one to ask the question, someone who shall not be named, and got interrupted by Jalen Hurts and said, there's nothing wrong with him and Nick Sirianni. Now, take that as you wish, but the thing that I took away from that was one quote that I think is going to take this team so much farther than any interpersonal relationship if they just keep to this identity of their culture. Jalen Hurts said, I've been on many teams, many talented teams. Talent can win you games. He said, but talent can't get you everywhere. He said, teams are what win championships. Man, that gave me the chills when I heard him say
Shows me that they learned their lesson from last year. I think that's a huge
It's not a
takeaway.
one-man game, dude. It's 100% buy-in from all 90 guys on the roster, from the coaches, from the front office. Jalen Hurts saying, essentially, we have to put aside our differences for the betterment of the team. That's the ultimate message that Jalen Hurts could have set on day one of training camp. I don't think he could have said anything else that would have perfectly encapsulated what they have to look at as a team. It can't be just him and Nick Sirianni. It can't just be the wide receivers. It can't just be Howie Roseman. It's everybody bought in, putting aside their differences, because teams are what take them to the Super Bowl. That was 2017, and that was 2022. They've been there. Jalen has seen this ship get to the promised land and almost held a Lombardi trophy. They have to put 2023 aside, which I think Darius Slay, he was another one who said, I think we just threw 2023 away. We're not thinking about that. We're on to 2024. Everything seems good coming out of the NovaCare complex.
Yeah, it was the energy that they needed from their quarterback. And again, I think Jalen's stoicism at times can be very good for this football team. I think it's a strength of his as a leader, as a quarterback, especially during games when you need him to be calm and not be too high or too low. But there are times where it calls for Jalen to be a more vocal leader, where his energy does need to be different. He even said at the end of the year, I think certain seasons, certain teams need different versions of me. And I liked the energy I saw from Jalen today. He was smiling. He was energetic. The press conference too, even if him and Nick Sirianni are not on the same page, telling the media that is giving into the rat poison, which is what he always preaches. And that's why I was so frustrated during OTAs. I would understand why Jalen Hurts is upset with Nick Sirianni, why they wouldn't be on the same page. I think the quarterback has every right, but why say that? Why give this media market the fuel that they already don't need to create this? And then you just add the fuel to the fire. And even, especially if there is no problems, Jalen today said that they have a great relationship and he's very confident in Sirianni leading this team this year. If that's the case, then your stoicism in the OTA press conference made even less sense. So I'm very happy that, I don't want to say he learned his lesson, but he did bring a different message, a different energy to the start of training camp, because that's so important, especially from your leader of a football team that lost a lot of leaders this year. So he was great on the field today, but I was more impressed and more happy with what he did off of the field.
You put it perfectly in the tweet that you quote tweeted that statement with, and you said, "See, was it that hard to put that statement out?" And that
we're good.
They had to.
It's that simple.
You just had to lay it out there, put it to bed so the media can write it in their stories. But ultimately, they have to overcome their differences. I'm sure you've heard in your line of business, you're not going to get along with everybody that you work with. Heck, that's football. That's every environment. And Jalen Hurts understands that. And man, you talk about how good he sounded off the field. It sounded like he was dialed in. Sounds like he's continued to work on his release, continued to work on his footwork. Like he was sharp right off the bat. And to see the offense clicking right out of the gate, to see those relationships continue to mend, as we had talked about with AJ and Devontae and Dallas Goedert. It's not new guys coming in here having to learn the rhythm and timing. Yeah, you have to learn the new offense together, but we could go through those woes together because we already have that connection. And it seemed like those little added wrinkles from Kellen Moore are going to make things fun on offense.
I know. It was one tiny tweet. It was one 10-second video I saw from a beat reporter, but it got me excited, Gino. All I saw was Jalen Hurts practicing pitching to Saquon Barkley, but he was faking a read option almost to another player, then rolling to his right and having that option to pitch it to Saquon. And that gave me the idea of, why has this team not been running triple option ever in the Jalen Hurts era? And it got me excited that things like that, new plays, are going to be in this new offense. It was, again, just a 10-second video of them warming up before practice actually started, but it already got me thinking and excited about this new look offense.
A couple beat reporters as well had said that there were a few times when both Dallas Goedert and Devontae Smith on back-to-back occasions, they were motioned in the backfield prior to the snap.
It made me tear up reading that.
All of a sudden, they're sitting in open space, and Jalen Hurts can go and find them.
Riddle me that, huh?
I went to school with a lot of physical therapists, and they have this cheesy quote, but it's, if you want to continue to just have muscles and not get hunchback in Notre Dame, motion is the lotion. That's what it is in football, man. Motion is the lotion. That's what's going to make this thing go. It's going to make those guys have
we need that on a t-shirt.
An easier time getting free releases, being able to use their football IQ. Okay, I'm jetting across the formation, right? And I see I have a safety on me. Now I can understand where his leverage is, find space, help my quarterback out. There's going to be so many different times where you're going to see these choice style routes in this offense where Kellen Moore is going to say, hey, get up to the DB right at the point of the stem, right at the top of your stem. You're going to find space, and you got to trust Jalen Hurts is going to put the ball there, because that's what this offense is going to continue to show, is how much trust there is between these guys. And like you said, I think the triple option is going to be there because you trust a guy that could probably run that, where in the past, did you have somebody that you trust could run that with Jalen Hurts? I don't necessarily know, but now you have somebody offering that idea in Kellen Moore, and new things are coming this way to the offense, and it looks good right off the bat, and that's what we want to see. See creativity right off the bat, make it difficult for the defensive backs, even though the defense looked pretty good today, too, from the sounds of it.
Absolutely. We're going to get into some defensive takeaways, who were on the first team, second, and third team for the first day of Eagles training camp practice. We'll get into all that and more on this Wednesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast.
If you want to go to Lincoln Financial Field, there's only one place that you go to get your tickets. I'm telling you, you're going to go nowhere else except for Game Time. I've been using Game Time, I think, since their inception. I saw them at first and I said, they're unlike everybody else, because I opened the app, and this is way back when, and you could see your seat, what your view was going to be. You saw the all-in price. There was no fees or anything behind the scenes that you had to worry about. And I've been using them through this day. Keep this on the down low. Me and my wife, we're going to a couple Dave Matthews concerts. Just got the tickets on Game Time for her and myself. If you want to go to Lincoln Financial Field, as I said, get your tickets on Game Time. All 4 major sports are going to be back. So if you want to hit up the trifecta down in South Philly, go to Wells Fargo, go to CBP, go to Lincoln Financial Field. Game Time is the place to get your tickets. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase of MLB tickets or anything else you are interested in. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Guys, you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day, got to turn on the volume with all the shouting. We'll make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Eagles concluded their first day of practice today at the NovaCare Complex for 2024 training camp. A lot of takeaways to get into, Gino. I think number one, all eyes are on the secondary, right? Seeing who's playing where, who's with the first team, who's with the second team. What is Vic Fangio trying to do with all of these young cornerbacks and the limited safety depth, especially with Sidney Brown starting things off on the PUP list? It looks like today, and again, as you mentioned yesterday, take everything from the first week or two when it comes to like the depth chart with a grain of salt. Take everything with a grain of salt when it comes to like where players are playing. Vic Fangio is going to experiment a lot, see who can do what. He just needs to get all these guys reps. So they're all going to play with pretty much all 3 teams. However, I think it is interesting that of the big 3 across from Darius Slay, that could be a starting outside corner, Quinyon Mitchell, Kelee Ringo, Isaiah Rodgers, it was Rodgers that got the first crack at CB2. Now, Ringo was also getting some first-team reps, but it was Rodgers that was the first guy out there opposite Slay.
That was one of those things that I just kept telling you that they've been working him outside, and he should be the next.
I mean, he's earned it. He's been really good since he's been back. He's shown no signs of rust. So,
and talk about somebody that just persevered, man. Like, could he have just quit football after he got in trouble for gambling and got that suspension? Like 100%. There are guys that just give up on their dreams for less, and hats off to him. He might be starting for the Philadelphia Eagles day one, never taking a snap for
it'd be quite the upset to beat out a first round. And again, this is day one, so I'm not going to try to lean into what I just preached, but he is starting right now over a guy that you traded up for 2 years ago that's young and from a big school that you traded a future 3rd-round pick for and a 1st-round pick. Like, that is pretty impressive, especially for when you were suspended an entire year and didn't play football.
It just goes to show that he was training. He was staying mentally sharp. He did everything the team asked him to do in OTAs, because they could have just said, all right, you're going to be with the 3rd team right off the bat. No, they said, okay, go and be with the 1st team. You've done enough work in the playbook. You've put in enough hours. You understand the defense. You aren't limited. You're picking things up and rolling with it. That's what you want to see from these guys. You want to see guys capture that moment and win this competition. But I thought the more intriguing part, Lou, was seeing Quinyon Mitchell
I did like it
in the slot.
And again, I'm not gonna
I know you don't like it.
I'm not gonna overreact.
I think training him in the slot at first,
it seems pointless to me. I don't want it. Because he's your 1st-round pick that you pick to be the long-term CB1 on the outside.
Play Avonte Maddox, who's 75% of the players.
Play your 2nd-round pick in Cooper DeJean, or train Isaiah Rodgers in there, the guy that you traded up.
He's not here right now.
Right, and that's why I would train Rodgers in there, play Maddox, Tyler Hall. To me, Quinyon Mitchell is supposed to be your long-term boundary corner. Again, I'm trying not to overreact while I'm overreacting.
Here he goes.
For me, I'm not saying now suddenly he's going to be a slot corner, and that's the plan now moving forward, but I just want him to be the starting outside corner. And I still believe he's going to be.
I don't think it's the worst thing in the world, because you see the top wide receivers that are in the league. I mean, look at CeeDee Lamb for Dallas. If he shows up for training camp.
No, that's a really good point. I do like that. If you're going to shadow and follow receivers as a CB1, you're going to play inside at times. That's a really good counter. I like
exactly. That. So let's say 3 years from now, you want him to shadow and follow a guy like CeeDee Lamb, right?
I want him to do it this year.
Yeah, that would be great, right? Ideally. But if you take him right now, you put him in those sub packages and nickel and dime situation where he is in the slot, and hey, Dallas, let's say they're in the offensive meeting room and they're like, okay, our matchup is Quinyon Mitchell versus CeeDee Lamb. Well, they're going to get opportunities to defend him in those areas, which...
You calm me down, Gino. You calm me down from it, because I was a little fired up.
It's more difficult than just like, if you have to hide a guy on the boundary in a cover 6 world where you can kind of do that, because the main cornerback in Darius Slay, he's probably going to shadow whatever is the number 1 receiver. The other corner is going to get the help of a lot of zone coverages in that quarter's half of the field when it comes to a Vic Fangio world. So if Quinyon Mitchell is in those slot areas, he's going to be responsible to understand zones, to understand where guys are going to sit in space, to understand his body leverage when he is playing in the slot where you give wide receivers two-way goes. Those are things which are much more difficult to train, in my opinion.
You didn't do it at Toledo. No, I get that. As long as that's the reasoning for it, as long as they're not going to just keep him at the slot practice after practice, and that's his main position.
You don't draft a slot corner in the first round of the draft anyway.
100%. And that's why, I know that that's the case. I just, of course, him being in the slot day one while Isaiah Rodgers is starting is, again, just not what I'm rooting for. But it's impressive for sure that Rodgers is that first team corner, but it wasn't just him. Again, Kelee, Ringo got first team reps today. Quinyon will get in there as well. I think the biggest thing to take away from the shuffling of corners, Gino, isn't these, because like we said, we knew there was going to be experimentation with these guys. They were all going to rotate in and out like they're in an open competition. The thing you actually can put weight to is that James Bradbury is not part of this equation at all. He was not even an option for them on the boundary at corner today. They are using him solely as a second team safety, which means to me he's either a depth piece at a thin position or he's going to get cut, which is music to my ears personally.
I believe Jimmy Kemsky put out 3 trades that the Eagles could make, and it was James Bradbury and a 6th round pick swap with the Buffalo Bills. And I think that's probably one of the best situations.
I brought up the Bills for Bradbury before because he was with McDermott in Carolina.
Yeah, he's one with McDermott in Carolina. They don't have that other. Yes, they
opposite
do
Sewell,
have. They have Christian Benford who they
solid.
trust in a lot over the last couple years, but that's a team that needs a little bit of depth there.
Veterans too, especially. They're a young position over there.
You can't make the justification to keep James Bradbury on the roster. And I feel bad that we keep beating a dead horse, but it's like they kind of threw him out there and like sent him out there to the Birds today, where he's a second team safety. Kind of the writing is on the wall for where they really see him, right? Like
they're not even trying to hide it.
And McCollum because Sidney Brown isn't there, and the writing's on the wall. I think that's kind of one of the moves they regret from last year. If they could have signed CGJ instead and just kept him on the roster for last year, I think that would have been great. But on more positive note, when it comes to the defense, Lou, get used to these Vic Fangio style fronts where you have Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, Milton Williams with their hand in the dirt, and then you have a combination of either Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff or BG and Nolan Smith as those stand-up edge rushers, just like we have been projecting in these Vic Fangio
or even Jalix Hunt.
worlds.
It sounded like Jalix Hunt had a good first day of practice, and he's got that tweener ability as a former safety.
Yep, you're going to see these 3 down fronts with these stand-up guys where versatility is going to be key. He's going to move them all around the formation. They're going to be asked to do a lot of different things. And maybe the biggest takeaway, Lou, Milton Williams not only played with the first team, he also played with the second team. So he was taking all of the reps at the interior defensive line. So they must trust him a lot with this unit.
Yeah, for sure. Some other takeaways: Tyler Steen starting off at the first team right guard. Not that surprising. Landon Dickerson did miss practice with a lacerated toe. I guarantee you it was because of the slipping slide.
He 100% cut his toe on a slip and slide.
100% cut his toe on that makeshift slip and slide. So he was out of practice. Mekhi Becton was the starting left guard, puked 10 times apparently, but stayed on the field like a champ. We're so back, man. Another thing too, Zach Bond remains the first team linebacker next to Devin White.
They like him a lot, apparently.
Yeah, I like him better on the edge personally, and I think that's where he'll end up more, but it is noteworthy they're making Nakobe Dean earn this job this year compared to last year. And honestly, Gino, I don't want Zach Bond starting, but I don't hate that they're not just giving Nakobe Dean the job because he hasn't earned that.
Was Zach Bond starting with Devin White during 7-on-7 and then during team it was Nakobe Dean?
Yeah, then Dean came in with the first team with White. So they weren't just keeping him off the field on the starting unit. But I do like that they're kind of making him earn it a little bit, not just giving him all of the reps.
And they even said it, Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni prior to the start of training camp, literally minutes before they hit the practice field, that this is a big season for Nakobe Dean. And I think there are big expectations for him. But in those team drills, it seemed that he was doing exactly what you would wish Nakobe Dean would do. Somebody who's instinctual, getting to the ball quickly. Said he made a couple plays on the ball when it came to pass coverage. Yeah, you got to earn it. And Zach Bond, hats off to him, man. He understood his situation coming into Philadelphia where they are a little light at the linebacker position. And he's a guy who can continue to win with his versatility because, like you said, he's probably somebody that you want to rush the passer a little bit more. But in a world where you have a Devin White, who that's kind of his bread and butter, maybe Zach Bond is more of like a stand-up Mike backer, and you're kind of transferring him to that position.
Well, especially if Jalix Hunt looks a lot more ready than we supposed he would be as a third-round pick, you might not need Zach Bond on the edge because then you have 5 guys there rotating through.
And I would rather have Jalix using his speed.
Too, absolutely, than Zach
train
Bond.
Him and get him in that role for sure.
100%. Camp rolls on. We got you covered for 3 more shows this week. Coming up next, though, right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, thrown out of the nest. We got some takes for you to wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and to level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions do apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, time now for Thrown Out of the Nest, as we do every Wednesday. It's a take that I would say most podcast listeners of ours would disagree with. Although before we get into that, Gino, you do have we were talking about the Giants and just the continuous just dragging of their reputation on Hard Knocks. Before we get into my take, you were talking to me about this before the show. The Giants just look, we've already known they've been an embarrassing franchise, and this isn't a Thrown Out of the Nest take. I think every one of our listeners agree with this. This show is just showing you inside the weeds, like how the hot dogs are made, and it's not a good look.
The situation with Saquon and the Giants right now, and Giants fans are probably going to find this like they always do, but it really feels like Saquon Barkley understood that he needed to move on from a situation where he was in a toxic relationship with an ex that just didn't understand what they had. And everything that comes out continues to lend to Saquon Barkley's side of the story. And the final topping on the cake was that he didn't know some of his contract discussions were being recorded with general manager Joe Schoen. If I've ever heard of weasel behavior in the National Football League, that's it to the nth degree. There's only one team that actually plays in New York. Shout out the Buffalo Bills. It makes sense this team plays in New Jersey. It makes all the sense that Tony Soprano was a Jets fan and not a Giants fan. And it makes all the sense in the world that that team is paying Daniel Jones instead of Saquon Barkley. I hope they lose every game for the rest of time. This is on you. Look in the mirror. Own up to your responsible self. I'm sorry, Joe Schoen. I'm sorry. Brandon Beane made you look like $1 billion. $1 billion. And that's why he has the job right now. And it's coming to light in this Hard Knocks what truly goes on with the New Jersey Giants. And it's not great.
Their owner especially looks so embarrassing with some of the logic behind his motivations.
Don't do that here, but
I miss a good Gino rant. Okay, that was good cop. Now it's time for bad cop. I have an unpopular take. I was watching I can't remember her name, Gino. She was formerly on Good Morning Football. She had Lane Johnson on her podcast the other day.
Oh, are you talking about Kay Adams?
Yes, Kay Adams had Lane Johnson on her show, and he was talking about how Jason Kelce has been pretty much in the building for Philadelphia like every single day in the summer and since he retired. So I love Jason Kelce. I think he's one of the, if not the greatest center of all time. He might be considered the greatest Eagle of all time. I personally do think he needs to stop coming to the facility as much as he does. Unless you're going to play or unless you're going to coach, let these, like, you're a legend. Like, we're going to love you forever. And we want you to be a part of this organization eventually. But give these young guys some time, at least in my opinion, to take over this team. Like, give Cam Jurgens time to really grow into this position without having the GOAT lurking behind him, where at any point this guy can unretire. Like, to me, I don't know, and this is probably a stupid take, but either play or coach or just give these guys some breathing room. I don't know. That's just, it's like when a kid first moves into their first apartment and the parents are coming over like every single day right after, like, give me a month or two. Like, let me settle in and then we can do that. I don't know. That's just my take. Because Lane said Kelce's been around. He still has a locker. He's there almost as much as anybody else, still working out. It's like, then play. If you're going to work out, then play.
It's like the kid in college who he graduated, but all of his friends.
Yeah, he's still coming to the frat parties.
Him, and you're
like, come on, dude.
Come on, man. It's
yeah.
Go enjoy time with.
I'm sure if you're a professor at the college, okay, that's fine. But
yeah, for sure.
Driving to the campus,
if you're assistant O-line coach, then we can be talking about things. No,
I don't know. Most people will be like, he can come.
He's a football guy, man.
Yeah, I know.
He can do whatever you want. He can walk anywhere into Philadelphia and do whatever he wants. He could walk into Citizens Bank Park the next time the Phillies have a home game and line up ahead of Bryce Harper, and I think the entire city would applaud him anyway. So he can really do whatever he wants. Shout out to him and his autism foundation, his fundraiser down at I believe in Sea
Ocean
Isle.
City or Sea Isle, yeah.
Sea Isle, yeah. They made a ton of money, but if you're gonna have a guy like him, Lou, who at the end of the day is exactly what you want in your organization to set the tone, to be around every single day, it's not the worst thing in the world.
It's like a tease, though. It's like
it is. I think it stinks for you and I because you're just waiting for like Kane to put his mask on behind the WWE scene and walk out, and you're like, oh, there he is again, and that kind of is like
when are you putting when are you putting the cape back on?
Yeah, exactly.
You're walking around,
Batman coming out.
Yeah, when are we suiting up? So, all right, that's gonna do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Got 2 more days of practice for you for the Locked On Eagles podcast this week, and then we'll be back next Monday through Friday to continue to cover 2024 camp and eventually the preseason coming up. Before you know it, the regular season will be here as well. We're flying through the summer. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. For Gino Camilleri, I'm Lou DiBiase signing off. As always, thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds.
Fly, Eagles, fly.